All right, hey guys. Happy New Year, I guess is how we should start things off here. Hope the holidays were good. Lots of visiting with family and friends. I haven't made a video in quite a while. We've had two cash games. We had one yesterday. We booked a win, so we're starting the new year off, 2020, with a W, which is good. And about two cash games ago, the last cash game of 2019. I found myself in a really interesting spot. It was a 3-bet pot with 3 players. And I c-bet the flop, and the second I did it, I realized I hated the c-bet and also hated the sizing, and I got jammed on. And we ended up putting the money in. I think the money still goes in just given the way the hand plays out. But the key thing is just recognizing when you should be c-betting and when you shouldn't, and I think this was clearly a mistake. So I just decided to make a video about it. It's kind of interesting, so let's take a look. I'm going to toggle back and forth. Instead of having the webcam on the screen at all times, we'll just toggle back and forth. So I decided to use my mad PowerPoint skills here and do something different for the video. So let's dive in. The hand starts off with, we're playing 2-5, no limit Texas Hold'em, and a couple things. So it's going to be me, Aaron, and Eric who are in this hand. Small blind post 2, big blind post 5, and we've been straddling for most of the sessions. So I'm in the straddle. I make it 10 bucks. Middle position, who I believe was John, calls the $10. Aaron's in the cutoff. He decides to make it 40. Eric, who's in the big blind, he calls the 40. And then I decide to get a little cute. I do choose the King 5 suited, and I make a big 3-bet to 160 bucks. And they both call me. Aaron calls, and Eric also calls. And now I know you guys are thinking, Trev, why the King 5 suited? I'll dive into the ranges here in a little bit. I'll try and keep it as simple as I can. One of the dynamics that was going on is, I mean, Aaron's going to open in the cutoff with a pretty wide range, use their position. Same thing with Matt and whoever's in the late positions. They're going to open a wider range of hands and take advantage of their position. Eric had been calling a ton. He's directly to my right, and he'd been calling a ton, and I was trying to find some hands that I can squeeze with, like even ace-9. I'm probably going to 3-bet it and try and just squeeze, put a ton of pressure back on the opener, in this case Aaron, and then even more pressure on Eric, who's now stuck between, you know, an open and now a 3-bet. So he's now got the weakest range and he's getting tons of pressure. So I was trying to squeeze as much as possible, and I just, I couldn't pick up any hands. So I decided to try the old King 5 suited, and this is what developed. So all right, let's take a look. So 3 of us to the flop with around 500 bucks. I guess I'll show you the flop in a second here. We'll look at the ranges. Now, this is Upswing Poker. This is their actual hand ranges. There's no straddle position when we talk about the ranges, so I just use the big blind range. I mean, it's effectively the same thing. Eric's still out of position to me, and I'm the straddle. He's in the big blind, I'm in the straddle. It may as well be the small blind and the big blind, and then Aaron's in the cutoff. So it plays the same way. It's the exact same kind of thing. So I use the big blind range. And I advocate for this too. You should be calling or completing with a ton of hands. If Aaron makes it 40, Eric calls the 40. We're already in for 10 bucks in the straddle. We only need to call 30 more. More than likely, John probably would have come along. So we're getting a really, really good price to call with a wide range of hands. They advocate, obviously, 4-betting or 3-betting your premium hands, jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace-king, and then mixing it up, staying super polarized here with like the 5-4 suited, the 6-5, the 6-4, stuff like that. Like I said, I still mix in some ace-5 suiteds, and this time I tried to do it with king 5. I just wasn't squeezing enough given the dynamic, and I think I should have been. So I tried something and didn't work out, but we'll dive into it here anyway. So the next question then is, what does Aaron have? If he's calling a 3-bet, what does his range look like? Well, he's 4-betting aces and kings 100% of the time, right? Aces, kings, and ace-king, Aaron's always going to 4-bet. Queens, more than likely 4-betting too. I would say like 80% of the time 4-betting. The odd time he might work in a flat there, but more than likely Aaron's going to be 4-betting the queens. Calling jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, all that good stuff. You can see in the dark here, even Upswing says 4-bet the ace-4 and the ace-5 suited. Mandatory, that's just kind of the suited wheel aces. I know Aaron's very aware of that, and I think he can definitely do it. They also advocate you can 4-bet ace-2, ace-3, ace-6, all the way up to ace-9. So suited aces up to ace-9, either, 4-bet it or fold it. So they don't like you flat calling with those. But realistically, I think we do. I don't even think I 3-bet or 4-bet, sorry, all of the suited aces as much as I probably should. But the point is, home games play looser. So I tried to make a realistic representation of what Aaron can actually have here, flat calling my 3-bet in the cutoff. So he never has the queens, kings, aces, or ace-king, because I know those are 4-betting. Ace-queen can go either way. Sometimes he 4-bets, sometimes he flats. Definitely king-queen and ace-jack still calling. All the suited aces, it's more realistic that you just flat ace-9 and ace-8 suited. I think that's how I've been playing them as well. And then, like I said, half the time, you can see the ace-5 and the ace-4 are darker. I would say half the time 4-betting, half the time flatting. And then calling with a whole bunch of 2-pair stuff, like king-10 suited, king-jack suited, all those suited broadways, 6-7, 7-8. You're always going to peel in position, try and take a flop. So the next one up, what does Mr. Eric Castleman have? This is where it gets interesting. So with Upswing, and this is how you really should be playing out of the small blind, it's raise or fold. You should literally be 3-betting or folding. You're in the worst position in the entire table. So you want to make it like 3.5 to 4x when you 3-bet. Like 3-bet big to make up for your positional disadvantage, right? So, yeah, like I would be 3-betting 3.5 to 4x or folding. And given these charts, they're showing you kind of what you should be 3-betting for value, and then some of the ones you can try as a bluff, like the 5-6 suited or the ace-2 suited. But Eric's a splashy guy. He likes to see a lot of flops. He's not afraid to move chips and bet big and get creative, so he elects to overcall again to my 3-bet. And again, I try and figure out, well, what does he have? I know what he doesn't have. He never has aces, kings, or queens, or jacks. Like to us, even 10s and 9s. I went as far down as 9s. Maybe the odd time he just flat calls 9 out of the small blind, 9s out of the small blind. But to a single open from the cutoff, he should be 3-betting this so often out of the blind, especially out of the small blind, right? Like, take a look here. They're 3-betting all the way down to 6s. So I'm quite certain Eric would be 3-betting 9s. And he would get out of the way. When I 3-bet, he's going to let go of the king jacks and the king 10s, the queen 10s off, because he's good enough to know those are a dominated range. But it makes perfect sense that the middle pocket pairs, 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, all the way down to 2s, are now getting a good price to set mine, right? So that makes sense. I can definitely see him calling with all the mid to low pocket pairs. And then any of the funky, like I said, suited Broadway cards, the king 10s, the king 9s, queen 9 suited, and maybe a few suited aces. I don't know how savvy Eric is on the whole suited wheel aces topic and how frequent he, 3-bets or 4-bets them, but I can definitely see flatting a couple of them. So yeah, definitely a few suited wheel aces or suited aces in general. All right. So this is the lovely flop. You've got the king, the jack, and the 10. So you can see why I got in trouble a little bit. King 5 of spades is our hand. We have top pair and the second nut flush draw. And at a glance, it does look like a fantastic flop. Like, we like our hand. We have top pair, and we're not going anywhere because we've got a big draw. Here's where it gets tricky. And you have to ask yourself that at all times. If I get shoved on right now, for all of it, do I love my hand? Probably not, right? You're probably a dog. You're not a favorite to win the hand. Yes, we have a lot of equity, but the goal isn't to stack off behind. That's not how it works, right? The entire goal, the job of a good poker player is to navigate their stack into the most profitable positions over and over again and win the money. So that's just what you do. You get your money in a head and hopefully you hold. If you keep jamming for heaps for your whole stack behind, I mean, yes, you're going to spike it a couple times, but in the long run, these percentages are averages for a reason. In the long run, you're just going to end up being a losing player. you want to get your money in good when you're ahead, right? So, and then minimize the draws or kind of control them to see if you can get, you know, the right price to draw. So in this case, I elected to cbet, and I dislike it for a few reasons. So when we head to the the flop here, we got roughly 500 bucks in the middle. Eric checks, and I bet $200. And I know my thought process was, all right, half the pot's roughly 250. I'm going to bet even smaller than that, maybe keep it around the 40% range, somewhere in there. So I bet 200. Aaron thinks for a bit, and he decides to rip it all in. And that's like the worst case scenario, because we like our hand, but we don't love our hand. So clearly Eric folds. I guess he just didn't have any of that, or he must have had some of those small under pairs. It just gets out of the way entirely. And we decided to, you know, stick our stack. We decided to stick the remainder of our chips in the middle and see if we can't get there. But I don't love it. And I knew right away it was a mistake. So let's take a look and see how it runs out here. I love this slide. It's kind of funny because it's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes players just hold over you. Like Matt's been holding over me. I think he's probably won, you know, if we've had 10 big pots, he's probably won 7 or 8 of them. And same thing with me and Aaron. If we've had 10 big pots, I'm probably winning 7 or 8 of them. It's just kind of funny how it goes. So the last few months, I've sort of been holding over Aaron with a lot of these big pots. So I kind of love this picture, which, yes, I stole from Facebook there. And you're just glaring at me. It's a dope picture. I love it. It kind of works for the slide. But I picked up a few more outs. So we can now hit a king or a 5, 4 more outs to make a full house. And I think we actually end up getting more equity on the turn than we actually had on the flop. But we brick off. Yeah. So 6 of diamonds on the river, complete brick. And Aaron ends up scooping what was just shy of, I think it was pretty close to a 3K pot. And as you can see me in the chat box, the bubble, I hate my cbet. Which I'll explain why shortly here. So first I'm going to do one other thing here. I am going to switch over to this slide here and clear all of them. So this is Equilab. It's really, really simple. I won't go too crazy with it, but 3 different ranges just to show you how bad a shape you are in when you cbet. So let's put in our hand, which is the, oops. So if you can see here, we have King 5 of spades real quick. And then let's put in Aaron's range here. Pre-flop is this one right there. So this is pre-flop. So Aaron had pre-flop, never has the queens, kings, aces, or ace, king like we discussed because he would have 4-bet them. So it's everything we already kind of talked about. He's definitely continuing with this range. And if we hit evaluate, just pre-flop, before anything happens, we're already kind of like a 60-40. Because we have king high. So what we'll do now is I'm going to put in the flop. And you can just see the 3 different ranges. What does he continue with, and what are we facing when we get jammed on? So we said king of diamonds, and then jack 10 of spades. And I'm just going to put in Aaron's calling range and hit evaluate. So on the flop, if we just bet and Aaron just calls, what does his range look like? Well, he's still going to have, you know, he can have ace queen off in slow play. He can have ace jack. He could have king queen, which is pretty awesome too. You know, top pair open ended. Ace jack, ace 10, all the suited spades, right? Any of the nut flush draws. Queen 9 is the second nuts. I had to remove ace 5 because the 5 of spades in our hand. Same thing with 10-9 of spades, 10 of spades on the board, 6-5 and 4-5. We have the 5 in our hand, right? So we're basically flipping at this point against Aaron's calling range. Now, let's take a look at Aaron's jamming range. So when Aaron jams, he's got a nice hand. And we're no longer in good shape. So it's kind of like a 60-40. He's always jamming. Let's take a look here. He's always jamming a set of jacks, a set of 10s. Ace queen is the nuts. King Queen, like I said, could go either way. Top pair open-ended. He could decide to, you know, jam the Queen 9, which is the second nut straight draw, and then all the suited spades, then nut spade draw. So any one of those hands puts us in pretty bad shape here, right? Like his overall range is stronger than our hand. The interesting part is we actually pick up a little bit of equity when we see the turn, which was what, the 5 of diamonds, I believe it was. So we actually pick up a little bit more equity with those 4 extra outs on the turn. Usually your equity keeps going down by the turn, but that 5 does actually it was the 5 of hearts, that's right. Plays the same way. So we got a little bit more equity on the turn. But either way, you can see we're flipping at best or value owning ourselves. Like his range is just too strong. So when we called off not a favorite, which you try not to do. That's not how you win in poker. So I'll pull back up the other slide here right away and just kind of get into it for the last 2 seconds. All right. Look at those slide transitions. All right. So real quick, just to wrap it up, when you bet the flop, or when you're looking at a decision, like on this flop, you need to bet for value with a certain range of hands. You need to bet as a bluff with a certain range of hands. You need to have some hands that can check call, and then there's other hands that you just check fold. You're just waving the white flag and releasing. So there's kind of 4 categories. Which one should you be c-betting with, and which one should you be check calling with? I think that's where it gets the trickiest, and this is where I feel like the King 5 should have been a check call all day long. So let's take a look at it. Real easy, all of your sets. So kings, jacks, and 10s, definitely going to be a value bet. You want to start building a pot with your big hands. Ace, queen is the nuts. I think you can still start c-betting with your top 2. I mean, middle 2 and bottom 2. Those ones kind of get trickier, but definitely top 2. And I like the ace, king of spades. I mean, you do have top pair, but you also have, you know, the biggest flush draw kind of blocked as well. If you're going to bluff, typically I like bluffing with your low baby spades. You can't win with 7 high or 6 high or 5 high. So I like choosing, you know, the 4-5 suited, the 5-6 suited. Those are the hands that I want to bluff with, and we have some equity if we hit our flush draw. Which then leads to, which hands do you check call? Like, what if I had aces on that board? Aces on king, jack, 10. You don't love it, because 10s and jacks are a huge part of a 3-bet calling range. And all the 2-pair combos, the suited 10-jack, the suited king-jack. So I think aces are almost a check call there. Ace-king offsuit, it's still the same thing. It's a 1-pair hand. It's an easy check call, but you don't love life if you get raised. So I think I check call that. Same thing with queens. Your opponent can still have a king. Yes, you're still open-ended, but I think queens is still a check call. And like I said, king 5 should be a check call. And ace 5, everyone says, Trev, what about the suited aces? Well, the suited aces could go either way. It's almost, it's such a strong equity hand. You can c-bet it. You still don't have anything. It's kind of like a semi-bluff. But when you're bluffing, you want to use the worst possible hands. And I think bet your low baby flush draws and check call your high flush draws is a stronger, more balanced strategy. Especially with ace 5, because you have 1 overcard. Maybe the ace is good now. So I kind of lean more towards check calling ace 5. Like your high flush draws, and then bet your low or baby flush draws. So yeah, that's kind of how I choose to balance out my range. If I were to do it again, and I'll give you 2 tips here. If I were to do it again, I would bet smaller. Like, I think if I were going to c-bet, I would c-bet 20 to 30%. Like, what if I bet, instead of 200, what if I bet $100? Like, that's really small. That's like 1/5 the pot, or 20%, right? It's going to look really weird for Aaron to just rip it all in. Like, it's just, it makes no sense anymore. It's such an overbet. Like, what are you doing that with? So now he's in a weird spot, whether he calls or he raises a little bit. So, like, I think betting really small would be better. 100, 125, something like that, or 120, I don't know. or just check calling. So bet really, really small. And that's another thing. In multi-way pots, you should be betting small. Most of our games and good players, you're going to be playing heads up or 3-way to a pot. Like, we played 9.5 hours yesterday. I think there was four or five pots where we had 4 or 5 players. In 9.5 hours, only 4 or 5. So if you find yourself in a game where there's 4 or 5 callers every single round, it's probably not the strongest poker being played. There's a lot of limping and calling and being passive. And it's really hard to gauge where you're at when you're 5-way or 6-way to a flop. So you should be betting smaller in general. 20% pot, 30% pot. So I recommend doing that. And if I were to do it all over again, I would definitely bet smaller. And then the second one is splitting your top pairs. So in this example, I said you should check back some top pairs like King 2 to King 7, just kind of referring to this exact example. Where I got that from, the Upswing poker site is a pretty good training site. I've purchased a few of their courses. They're like $1,000 US or something. I got the 6 Max. I got the Heads Up. I dove into their lab a little bit. But the Heads Up Mastermind course by Doug Polk, I found was by far the most value for me, just in terms of how he thinks about a hand and thinks about ranges all together to stay balanced. And when you play Heads Up, you can't just bet every single top pair and then check back all your second pairs, right? Your second top pair or whatever, or your middle pair. You have to be more balanced than that. You have to be smarter than that. Like with King 5, you can't get 3 streets of value. You're not going to town with that shitty kicker and bombing all 3 streets. Like, maybe you do, but it's probably not the most optimal way to play, right? So you have to kind of figure it out. I want to have some top pairs in my check back range. So a good way to do that is split your range. So in this case, maybe only bet King 8 plus and check back King 7 and below, right? So maybe I'm value betting the King 9 or the King 10, and then I check back King 6 and King 5, because really you can only get like 2 streets, maybe 1 street for sure, maybe 2 streets, depending on how the board runs out with that top pair that's not super strong, right? So I would say multi-way pots, tip number 1, bet smaller, and then split your top pairs. Check back some of the smaller, the weaker top pairs, and bet your better top pairs. And then just watch your sizing all around. Anyways, guys, that's basically it. Just wanted to dive in. It was a fun video to make. Hopefully, you guys got something out of it. If you're 3-betting the King 5, watch out for the situation that I just mentioned. But it's good. Just good to review hands. Good to chat with a buddy about it. Go over at it. Ask questions. Try and get better. That's why I do these videos. It actually helps me see things in real time at the table. So yeah, hopefully there's some more stuff coming down the pipe. I'm sure we got a lot of games coming up. If there's more interesting hands, I will put in the work to make a creative video. These things take a little while. This one I think was about 6 hours of putting stuff together, so hopefully you liked it. But that's it for me. Thanks for watching.